Hello, I'm Sebastien Soubiran. I'm the director of the Jardin des Sciences. Maybe firstly, I would like to explain how I arrived in the University of Strasbourg, like 18 years ago, which seems like a long time ago. I'm trained as a physicist, and then I turned to history of science. So afterwards, I decided to do a PhD thesis in history of science and to convert myself into social history and social and cultural history. And during my PhD, I work on a completely different subject about the one I'm dealing with now. It was more to do about the relationship between the military and the scientists. But during that PhD, I also get acquainted with the notion of heritage. I had some opportunities to work with colleagues of mine at the Curie Museum, which is a science museum dedicated to Marie Curie in Paris. And I also was part of a big survey on the development and the way like scientific heritage is starting to raise between academic institutions. So when I finished my PhD, I had the opportunity to get a position in Strasbourg because they were looking for someone who will be able to work on a strategy for the preservation of the heritage of the physics, of the history of physics at the University of Strasbourg. So because of my background in physics and my background in historian of science, I came in Strasbourg to get that position. And I started to work with a specific department who was dealing with the development of a scientific culture, but also dealing with the preservation of scientific heritage of the university. So it was not yet the Jardin des Sciences, the structure I will talk about, but it was a department that was starting to deal with this third mission of the university, that is introducing and enhancing the dialogue between citizens and the academics. So my first job at the University of Strasbourg was very much connected to the preservation and valorization of the heritage of physics. And my background as historian of science was, of course, very useful for that. And my background as physicist was also very useful just to get a conversation with the actors, with the retired physicists. That will be very helpful to explain where the collections are, what kind of instruments did they preserve, what was the history from their point of view of the physics in Strasbourg, and so on, to collect lots of historical material also. It was very helpful to have this understanding of the fields, but also the understanding of how to approach historical material and historical archives also. So basically, during the first 4 years, I would say, I worked with different collaborators to start an inventory of the scientific instruments connected to the history of physics in Strasbourg, but also start collecting paper archives about the history of physics in Strasbourg. And this start a more general process about the inventory of scientific heritage within the University of Strasbourg. So we also connected this inventory with astronomy. So we also deal with astronomical instruments and the history of astronomy in Strasbourg. We also did an inventory about different kind of scientific instruments. And finally, we did a kind of whole inventory of the historical campus of the University of Strasbourg, because this campus has a specific history because the University of Strasbourg had the German and French history. In the late 19th century, the University of Strasbourg was a new university, was developed by Germany, because after the 1971 Franco-Prussian War, Alsace was a new land for Germany. So Strasbourg was a German city, and they decided to build a new campus, a new university campus, with the model, the new modern image model of the university, that is connection between teaching and research, having a campus of the university which is with all the institute in the same area to get a connection between the different fields and so on. And we also started to they also deal with the scientific fields, which was also very important at that time. So we've been lucky to inherit from this period of time in the late 19th century of a brand new university with a modern model, which will diffuse all over Europe and all over Occidental world. And with not only a strong presence of scientific disciplines, but also lots of investment into equipment, buildings, and tools. So we inherited very rich collections from that period also. So now I can talk about also my how that investment into scientific heritage impact my research work. In fact, it was very interesting to develop a research on how the scientific community, and in my case, how the physicists were dealing with the preservation of their heritage. Because there's lots at stake especially for physicists, because physicists tend to take care of their heritage when there is a kind of mutation in the field. And this was the case because physics was facing lots of transformation. For instance, the rising of mathematics and informatics and computer science, the rising of health science. So physics was not anymore one of the top scientific fields that will receive the main interest, not only by students but also by the government. So there was lots of change in different sense. So when the community is confronted to a big change, then they are turning to their heritage, of course, because they're trying to revisit their history and to reassure themselves into a long-term history. So that's one point. But what was also very interesting in the discourse they are building on heritage, because how they succeed to talking about the past, but also promoting a scientific, innovative image of science, which is science is the future. It's not something from the past. So their relationship with the heritage is always there's always big tension between them. And so I decided to try to understand these tensions, not only to help us to go ahead with the heritage process of the scientific heritage, but also to have a kind of interesting research project, especially when you're broadening the view and you're starting to deal, and this is my point now, I'm mainly dealing with the university collections and museum at large, and how to survive in a academic world where you have to legitimate the preservation of those collections and the importance of the role of a museum within a university environment. So this is not only professional activities as curator, but this is also how can you use your research activities, educative activities to legitimate the activity of preservation of scientific collections, but more generally of university collections and museums. So, and the connection between history of science and the activity of creating academic heritage is very interesting for that, because it can not only help to develop tools to legitimate the preservation of that heritage, but also to use those collections and those places as museum as research tools. So to demonstrate the scientific value, the universal or the atemporal scientific value of academic heritage and university museum. So I think this connection is very important between historian of science and the preservation of university heritage and museum. So now if I come back to my position, my current position, which is managing a structure that is in charge of public understanding of science, or public engagement for science, or dialogue between science and society. Maybe I should say that the University of Strasbourg is taking very seriously this mission, because this is a huge department. We are 31 persons working at the Jardin des Sciences, and the main activities are managing a planetarium. So we have a planetarium. We're the only university in France dealing with a planetarium, which is a kind of science center. We are in charge of the coordination of the preservation and valorization of university collections and museums. We are also in charge of different activity within the territory of Alsace, which is how to develop different activities and action to engage people with science, and to permit the connection between citizens and researchers, or people dealing with research, different actors dealing with scientific research. That's very important. We're also developing lots of educative activities for schools, of course, and different kind of events like science days, heritage days, museum days, star days, during the summer, when you're looking at the sky and you're explaining what you can see on the open sky and so on. So we have also lots of events. So basically every year, apart from the last 2 years, of course, because of the COVID, every year we are welcoming more than 80,000 people. So we have 80,000 participants to our different activities, from conference to education activities for schools. And now we are working on 2 different projects. It's a kind of very strong turn for the Jardin des Sciences at the moment, because we are engaged in the renovation of Zoological Museum. So you can see there the building of the Zoological Museum, which is also the building where is my office. So the challenge is to renovate this 19th century zoological museum into a science and society museum dealing with environmental issues. So that's our main, that's a big step for us. And we're also building a new planetarium to turn it into a more digital planetarium, and to have a bigger capacity for the public. So it will be 134 person capacity, and 15 meters of diameters for the screen. So it's a medium planetarium in the world. It's quite a big one, but you also have bigger one in the world. But it's a bigger planetarium for us. So it's a huge turn also, because we're gonna next to the new planetarium, we're also going to build a new building that will be a kind of welcome desk of the Jardin des Sciences. Because at the moment, the Jardin des Sciences, it's more like a concept, because we have different places, different museums, a planetarium, a botanical garden, and so on, within the historical campus. And this is what we call the Jardin des Sciences, the garden of science, connecting all those different museums and science museums together to offer a general activity towards public engagement for science. But now we're going to have an open gate for all those places, which will change for us and which will probably permit us to welcome more people, but also to rethink our offer and to enrich the possibility also to get access to those museums and to the historical heritage of the campus. Maybe I should mention at that point that the historical campus of Strasbourg has been classified as World Heritage of UNESCO, not as a university campus, but as being part of the German city, what we call the new city, that was built by the German, as I said, in the late 19th century. Maybe to conclude, I would say, obviously, a few words about what happened to us for the last 2 years, when we, like all our colleagues in the world, we were struck by the COVID-19. So, of course, it was a very difficult time, not only because we have to stop the activities, but because it was complicated for many reasons for lots of colleagues to deal with the COVID. We were lucky enough not having people very much affected by the COVID, but nevertheless, we certainly had to close most of our activities and wait for better times. Those better times came last September. We started to reopen most of our museums and activities, which is a good thing for us. But of course, we thought how to digitize some of the activities we were dealing with. And then we did it in a kind of complementary way. And we are still thinking how to deal with digital tools, other complementary tools for getting a better access to heritage, but also to participate to our mission of enhancing the dialogue between science and citizens, between scientists and citizens.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, dê um like, compartilhe. Aproveite para assinar o canal e ative as notificações.